This is the breastfeeding and pumping class from the OBGYN clinic. I'm Mrs. Mackenzie, the lactation consultant or IBCLC based in the OBGYN clinic. Just a bit of background about myself. I've been working in infant feeding for nearly 10 years here in the UK and abroad, and I'm a board certified lactation consultant or IBCLC. I always say in my class, everybody's feeding journey, like their birth, is personal to them, and no one can walk in your shoes. So I'm not here to browbeat you into breastfeeding, but if you'd like to, I'd be really happy to help. So these are the learning outcomes that we aim to cover tonight. Why breastfeeding matters, how it works, how to meet your goals, about pumping and breast pumps, returning to work. So this is a quote from Keith Hansen of the World Bank a few years ago, and what he's really trying to say is that breastfeeding is super important, not just because people love doing it, but also because it has a really good impact on health outcomes and the economy. This is a slide taken from a presentation that the Surgeon General did in 2011. So really this slide is really all about the excess health risks associated with not breastfeeding at all. So this is people who've done no breastfeeding at all. And these figures, can't sugarcoat them, they represent the percentage excess risk of health outcomes to you or to baby if you don't breastfeed at a population level. So, these are based on robust data because they come from the Surgeon General. However, for those who end up unable to breastfeed, and this will be a small minority, they can be reassured that formula is nutritionally adequate and safe if prepared correctly. And this isn't all or nothing. If you end up feeding formula and breastfeeding, again, every drop of breast milk counts. Sometimes you plan one thing and something else happens because of medical or other reasons, and it's okay to change your path. Turning now to why breastfeeding is important in relation to babies. So breastfeeding is the normal biological way to feed your baby. Breast milk helps improve your baby's health and development. The World Health Organization, WHO, recommends exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months and continued breastfeeding alongside other foods for at least the first year. And this will give your baby the best start in life. However, any amount of your breast milk will always be good for your baby's health and well-being. So again, it's not all or nothing. And breastfeeding isn't just important for baby, as you can see from this slide. So breastfeeding for mums helps to protect you against these diseases or conditions. In this section, we're going to look at how breastfeeding works, and we're going to cover each of these points: birth, feeding cues, how to make it work, positions, attachment, diapers, night feeds, and how can I increase my supply. So this is a slide about the magical hour, which came out of research by Widstrom et al. And basically you can see that the baby goes through these 9 distinct stages: birth, cry, relaxation, awakening, etc. And the first hours after birth are a developmentally distinct time for a baby, and there are well-documented short and long-term physical and psychological advantages when a baby is held skin to skin during this time. And if it's interrupted, the baby will start the sequence again. When a baby is in skin-to-skin contact after birth, there are these 9 observable newborn stages happening in a specific order that are innate and instinctive for the baby. And within each of these stages, there's a variety of actions that the baby may demonstrate. If for any reason your golden hour or magical hour and the skin-to-skin is interrupted right after birth, the skin-to-skin is like a reboot button. It's like a magic reboot button. So you can do it for days and weeks afterwards, and within the first 24 to 48 hours, baby will just start those 9 stages again. And if for any reason, baby's having difficulty getting to the breast because they've been interrupted, just start the skin-to-skin process again. And babies will eventually get there. They're hardwired to get to the breast. So this is a slide about baby feeding cues. So this is something that parents don't get told about enough, I feel. Your baby needs you to respond to their feeding cues, and their feeding cues aren't necessarily waiting for them to cry. We can pick up on early feeding cues. As you can see from this slide, we have baby moving around a bit, and then the second line where baby's getting really hungry, and then actually when baby's crying, that's really a late cue, and it's time to calm that crying baby down. And you need to feed your baby, within reason, wherever it's possible. You need to feed your baby whenever they ask and for as long as they need at each feed. So try and watch your baby, not the clock. You need to offer baby both breasts at every feed, even if they only take one. So it's really important, particularly in these early days when we're establishing your supply, that we offer the baby the second breast, because even if they look like they're asleep, they might actually just latch on while they're a bit sleepy. If you're not breastfeeding or you're mixed feeding, it's still important to feed your baby whenever they ask, and remember that this should be little and often. Giving unnecessarily large volumes of formula by bottle will stretch baby's stomach and may cause vomiting. How to make it work? So, of course, keeping baby close in the first days and weeks after they're born will be the best thing for baby and yourself, of course, but also it will help you to get to know each other. It will help make feeding cues easier to see. It will enable you to feed on demand or on cue, and it will help baby feel safe and cared for. All babies need lots of touching, holding and cuddling. You can't spoil a baby by giving them too much attention. Leaving a baby to cry is stressful for them and may affect their health and development. Skin to skin plays an important role in baby's development, and it can really assist with getting breastfeeding off to the right start. And here's a short video about the importance of skin to skin from Dr. Niels Bergman. And like he says in the video, it can be beneficial beyond birth.
Myself, my particular interest is the first hour, the first 6 hours impacts how we're going to become socially and emotionally intelligent. This is the essence of my research. The babies that are put skin to skin are warmer, measurably by half a degree. They have a higher blood sugar. They have a better return. They are breathing better, but above all, they're awake, they're alive. That aliveness and awakeness has got an important dimension. They will open their eyes and connect with mother. The first thing would be that the baby's born and it must stay with mother. And it stays with mother on mother's skin. Mother's skin is different to the skin on the rest of her body, and it's designed to be the place where a baby's born. And when the baby's born, it comes here and it's warmer. It's 2 degrees warmer there. And the baby will get its warmth from there. All the mother has to do is to just hold her baby and love her baby. When baby is born, one of the things that we would want to say to moms and dads is that this baby knows mom. And mom's smell in the uterus, mom's taste in the amniotic fluid, the sound of mom tells me I'm safe. Now, when I'm born, if mom is there, then I know I'm still safe. When the baby's born, especially if it's premature, what we will do is to put the baby very tightly in skin-to-skin contact, so the baby's like in the uterus almost. That containment is deep pressure touch. Goes directly to the emotional processing unit of the brain and reassures the amygdala that you're safe. And it's very important to ensure that parents learn quickly they can do this containment touch. Extremely premature babies will be in a context where their technology requirements may make it too difficult to do the skin-to-skin. The baby may have extensive major surgery. The mother may have been herself so sick, and so on. And yes, after weeks of being apart, you just start again. You just catch up. What you're then doing is optimizing the trajectory. We can recover some of these steps weeks and months, who knows, even maybe years later. The people who this baby should be exposed to are the ones who are going to be with this baby intimately, emotionally, closely for the next 2 to 3 years. I call part of the attachment environment, because now the baby learns that this is somebody that I must trust. the attachment environment can include grandmother or anybody who's going to be the committed, constant caregiver. A primary caregiver is the key thing for the baby's brain. It doesn't have to be mother. Mother might die. That happens in my country, unfortunately. And then another primary caregiver. The baby will not come to harm from change in primary caregiver. Can change primary caregiver once or twice even. But once you start passing the parcel and there's no primary caregiver, primary, 2 years, committed, babies start to decompensate. We need to be having a positive outlook with respect to the fact that babies who've had a very rocky start are not doomed in any way at all. We should be positive, but it can be hard work and it needs a lot of extra inputs. The earlier those inputs are provided, the better the long-term trajectory. And so we have occupational therapists, we have speech therapists. The earlier they can get in to work with supporting whatever deficits, whatever difficulties, whatever problems have been encountered, the better the long-term outcome is going to be.
The length of the feed isn't the sole indicator of how baby's doing at the breast. We also need to look at the swallows per suck. So at the beginning of the feed, a baby will do a bunch of sucks in rapid succession. Then, throughout the feed, it will slow down and do a pattern of 1 or 2 sucks to each swallow. Now, you may not be able to hear these, so watching baby's chin and throat should tell you. And babies take pauses as well while they're feeding, just like us. How do I know that baby's done? How do I know that they've fed enough? Well, in general, baby will come off each breast by themselves, and we shouldn't remove them early on. If baby falls asleep at the breast all the time and doesn't come off properly, or if they're not feeding efficiently, with those active sucking and swallowing patterns, then we really need to encourage them to feed more. If baby falls asleep at the breast all the time and doesn't come off properly, or if they're not feeding efficiently with all those really clear sucks and swallows, then we need to encourage them to feed more. And the way we can do that is by doing breast compressions. The way that we do a breast compression is to hold our thumb and index finger really wide and go all the way to the back of the breast. We can start off at the back of the breast and work our way forward or work our way around the breast. And we basically just need to bring our fingers together. So bring that thumb and index finger together and kind of squeeze that tissue. There's a really good demonstration of breast compressions on Dr. Jack Newman's website. Additionally, we can do something called switch feeding. So what is switch feeding? Like I said earlier, we shouldn't really be removing baby from the breast. However, if baby has fed on both sides, we can still continue to give a third or a fourth breast. It's unlimited, within one sitting. And that can help both establish or improve supply by keeping going, from one breast to the other. And it will mean that baby will get more milk as well. You mustn't see breast milk flow as a finite amount. The milk is always there, it's just sitting behind and we just need to open the tap up. Night feeds are critical as they're the time that your prolactin levels are highest and that helps regulate your supply. Prolactin is your milk-making hormone. In the beginning, we shouldn't really go more than about 3 hours during the day and 4 hours at night in the first few weeks. We want your body to maximize your supply, and there's a variable window of opportunity in those first hours, days, and weeks. So colostrum. What is colostrum? Well, this is the first milk that you make. And actually, you've been making this since 16 weeks during your pregnancy, give or take a week. And in the beginning, the volume of milk that baby receives is pretty small. So for instance, according to the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine, babies get between 2 and 10 ml or cc per feeding in the first 24 hours. And this can seem really concerning to some families, especially on the second day of life when babies tend to be grumpier. Unnecessary supplementation, unless indicated by your caregivers, may result from perceived breast milk insufficiency. So what does that mean? It just means that basically you've got to believe in your body, your body's capacity to feed your baby. Colostrum is highly concentrated. It's packed with carbs, protein, and antibodies. In fact, it's so potent and important that babies in NICUs who are still too immature to feed have colostrum swabbed inside their mouths. So when people talk about their milk coming in, they're talking about the milk maturation process. So gradually your colostrum will become transitional milk over the first day or so after delivery. And then beyond that, around about 3 to 4 days after delivery, your mature milk will come in. And that's what people are referring to when they talk about your milk coming in. So as we can see from this slide, newborns' tummies are really tiny and cannot and should not take in large volumes. So they just need to feed frequently or often. In the first day or so, their little tummy fills with between 2 to 20 ml during a breastfeed. And then, snuggled against you, they'll fall asleep. But then, just as you're drifting off to sleep yourself, once you've put the baby down in a safe place like their cot, just as you're drifting off to sleep, or you're deciding that you need to go and eat something, they may start to wake up and show signs of hunger. So newborn babies can feed irregularly, particularly in the first few days. And a newborn baby feeds about 8 to 12 times in 24 hours, which means they'll be feeding usually about every 1 to 3 hours. After the first 24 hours and for the first week or two, the baby should feed a minimum of 8 times, and that's a minimum of 8 times in 24 hours to ensure they stay hydrated. This is shown to us by their pees and their poops. It also, effective feeding obviously assists with things like jaundice and weight loss and gain. And it helps to, regular feeding helps to establish mum's milk supply properly and get lots of practice at the art of breastfeeding. Babies often cluster feed. This means that your baby may breastfeed for 45 minutes, then fall asleep, then wake 30 minutes later and feed for another 30 minutes and fall asleep. Then the next feed may happen 2 hours later. So, as you can see, I'm sure you get the idea, there's no set schedule, okay, particularly in those early days and weeks. The best way to establish a healthy milk supply is to allow a baby to control when they can eat and how much. You can't breastfeed your baby too much, but you can breastfeed them too little. This is just a little joke slide from La Leche League of Fairfax City. The majority of women can breastfeed with the right support and advice. Lactation failure usually occurs because of not emptying the breast sufficiently frequently and efficiently in the early days, and feeding more frequently makes more milk. It's very common for people to feel that they're not making enough milk, and it's an imaginary worry in most cases. Most people will make just the adequate supply for their baby, and what we have to do is just believe that we can do that. So in this next section, we're going to look at some breastfeeding positions. And breastfeeding positions are really critical for establishing good feeding practices. And like I've spoken about in the earlier section, good feeding practices mean that we establish a good supply early on and there's a good transfer of milk to baby. So in this particular hold, the cradle hold, it's a position that many of us use instinctively, and just a couple of things that we need to remember. So baby's tummy needs to be towards mummy. So that means baby's turned right in towards, so that they're facing the breast, that they're not turning their head in order to access the breast. Baby's head and body are in line, and that baby's head is free to tilt backwards. We shouldn't have anything holding the back of baby's head, no fingers or anything like that. We can just support baby's head in the crook of our hand, and we can support the neck, the head from the side, and the shoulders and the back. In this next slide, this model is demonstrating the cross-cradle hold, and this is super useful for some mums when they're just learning to breastfeed. So use your fingers under baby's neck so the weight of her head is supported, but make sure again that her head is free to tilt back between your thumb and finger. Have baby tummy towards mummy, and the palm of your hand supports baby's shoulders, and you can press on her shoulders to bring her into the breast when she's ready to attach. And your forearm can tuck the rest of baby's body against you while she feeds, and that's important to support the whole of the body like that so that she's not peeling away from you. This is the underarm or football hold. It's super helpful if you have a small or a preterm baby, or you've had a cesarean section, for example, or maybe for people with larger breasts or inverted nipples. You can do this to the side, like in this picture, or from underneath, depending on the shape of your breasts. The baby's usually held on a pillow just under the breast height and turned slightly towards you. So again, tummy towards mummy, The head is nice and free, and the rest of the body is fully supported. It's really important that baby, in this position, that baby's held really close to you. Again, like in all the other positions, but baby should not be able to push forward with their feet, otherwise they'll come too far forward and the latch will slip or you'll get painful latch. So this is the laid back or natural breastfeeding position. It really encourages primal birth reflexes, so babies are born with these innate birth reflexes, and it really helps them to self-attach or to attach optimally. Gravity is working in your favor, holding baby in place, and it's great for eye contact, as you can see from the picture. A really cool part of this position is that baby can learn to self-attach by themselves, and self-attachment can really help optimize the latch, as we're going to see in a video shortly. And comfort for you is really key, because you're going to be doing this for several hours a day, but also it can help with your letdown of milk. Gravity-aided positions like this one help newborns really maintain a deep latch. And like I've said before, a deep latch is a good way for transferring the maximum amount of milk.
You're hungry, Williams.
Yeah, those are definitely feeding cues.
Really? You're a silly one. Just put your arm over here. There. Are you comfy?
That's great. He loves to look at you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the learning part.
I think he can see me better like this than if I were to be sitting up and holding him.
Yes.
Like I would if I was feeding him a bottle.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
really he's like looking upwards at the ceiling instead of towards me.
You are right, and he's actually the perfect distance. The baby's vision is not as good as it will be, but the one area that they can see in is actually the distance between the breast and your face.
Mm-hmm.
Not surprising that nature made them that way, huh?
Right. Makes a lot of sense.
It does.
Baby-led attachment is where a baby uses their own instincts to find the mother's breast on their own accord. Baby-led attachment really helps to lay down the foundation for breastfeeding. A baby who has had many opportunities, particularly in the early weeks, to do baby-led attachment becomes a lot more orientated towards the breast.
I did baby-led attachment because I had a lot of trouble feeding my first baby and getting him to attach. And when I saw a video of baby-led attachment, it just looked like a natural way to do it. So I thought I would try it to see if that meant that I didn't have attachment issues with the children I had after my first one.
When I had my second baby, when she was born at home and she was lying on me, she all of a sudden attached by herself, which was a wonderful feeling, but I never followed up on it because I didn't know anything about it. And then when we moved to Australia, I so wanted to try it. So we tried it with this one. It really started at home. So when we got home, we started doing it. You don't have to do it straight away, baby-led attachment. It's something that they can do for quite a few weeks after they're born. It's imprinted in their being, I guess.
If a mother wants to do baby-led attachment, the tips that I would give her would be the timing of it. So a baby will be able to follow through on their instincts best when they're calm. So it would be when the baby's showing early feeding cues, such as turning their head from side to side with mouth open, sticking their tongue out, sucking on their hands, or it might be as soon as their baby wakes up from a sleep. So in those situations, baby's typically calm, and then if the baby's then placed skin-to-skin contact with the mum, and the mum, say, is in a semi-reclined position, then that will help a baby to follow through on their instincts to find their mother's breast.
Find a comfortable position. Many mothers find that a semi-reclined position with pillows behind them for support works well. A partially laid back position allows gravity to assist the baby in moving to the breast. With as much skin to skin as possible between you and your baby, place your baby on your chest, facing you, between your breasts, with her head just above your breasts. Start when your baby is calm, such as when she is showing early feeding cues like turning her head from side to side with her mouth open. As your baby starts to instinctively move towards a breast, she will start to lift her head and bob it around. As she moves towards a breast, you may find it helpful to hug her bottom in close to you and to support her neck and shoulders with your hand and wrist. It is important to avoid putting pressure on her head, as she needs her head free to instinctively move it into an extended position to help her attach and feed well. When her head nears your nipple, she may nuzzle around to find your nipple and bring her tongue toward it. When she finds the right position, she will anchor with her chin, open her mouth wide, attach, and begin sucking.
Straight after a baby's born, for the first 1 to 2 hours after they're born, they're typically alert and eager and ready to receive their first breastfeed. So when placed skin to skin contact with their mother straight after birth, then that can allow the baby to do baby-led attachment, find the mother's breast on their own accord and receive their first breastfeed.
I did skin to skin with all of my children in hospital. So with the baby, it probably took a few minutes before they would kind of just be laying there for a little while, and it was a few minutes before they kind of started moving around. But yeah, they did the bobbing around and choosing a side and finding the nipple and all of that themselves.
The great news is, even if you don't get to do baby-led attachment straight after a baby's born, a baby's instincts to find a mother's breast are easily reproducible for at least the first few months. When a mother and baby are in skin-to-skin contact, there are many benefits of it, such as the baby's heart rate and temperature, blood sugar levels, breathing rate are all kept stable. And also when a mother and baby are in skin-to-skin contact, it also helps a mother to be able to learn her baby's feeding cues.
As with the baby-led attachment, I also did try the mother-led attachment. Attachment and feeding was quite painful. I went to see a lactation consultant for a couple of times for her to help as well. Of course, they have told me to use the baby-led attachment, which was great.
Even if the mother doesn't have any breastfeeding problems, by using baby-led attachment frequently, particularly in the early weeks, it can help to reduce the risk of developing any breastfeeding problems, such as the baby simply not attaching at all or sore nipples.
Persevering with the baby-led attachment actually did help to heal the wounds, and I think it was around 3 weeks that we had a happy breastfeeding relationship.
Mother can do baby-led attachment whenever it's right for her and her baby to do so. By having done baby-led attachment whenever she feels comfortable to do so, then it means that when she is breastfeeding in public, it makes it easier because baby knows what they're doing and baby attaches easier to the mum's breast.
So I think the baby-led attachment improved my confidence by I was able to see them feeding well when I could look at them and I could see that they were attached really well, and I could hear the swallowing and I knew we were having a good feed, and so I didn't have to really think about what I was doing with them.
It helps to know about the fact that everyone's different. With baby-led attachment, it doesn't matter because babies just go for the breast. They know what to look for.
Baby-led attachment, it helps a mum and baby get breastfeeding off to a really good start, then it may help a mum to be able to breastfeed for as long as she wanted to and reach her own breastfeeding goals.
Lastly, and this again is a popular position, especially for new mums, is the lying down position. And it's super useful if you've got painful stitches or it's sore for you to sit down. And it can be really helpful if you're tired and you need to feed and rest. Just make sure that if you do fall asleep, that it's done safely and that you have somebody nearby to put baby into a safe place. You need to lie on your side with your head on the pillows and your shoulder on the mattress. The baby should be on its side facing towards you, with its nose opposite your nipple, and again, drawn in very closely with the head free to tilt backwards. Make sure that none of your arm is pressing on the back or the top of his head. And again, you can press on baby's shoulders and bring baby to the breast when he or she is ready. So, latching. Here are some key general tips. If you look at this slide, this is from an NHS leaflet called Off to the Best Start, which you can find online. It's an online PDF, which is great. Off to the Best Start, it's called. So, first of all, key thing, make yourself comfortable. Use pillows to support your back and arms. And some people find it super helpful to have another small pillow in their lap and to have their feet slightly elevated on a footrest. Position your baby near you with their mouth facing your nipple. Encourage your baby to open their mouth wide and pull them close to your nipple by supporting their back instead of the back of the head, so that the baby's chin presses up against your breast. This position will help your baby to latch onto your breast and locate your nipple. And if you feel any pain or discomfort, gently detach your baby with a little finger, putting the little finger in the corner of their mouth, and reposition for another try. And as you can see on this slide, you start off by holding baby's whole body close to you with the nose level to your nipple. And as I said in the previous slides, make sure that the head and body are in line and facing you so that they're not twisting their head around or their body awkwardly. Support your baby along the back and shoulders rather than the head so that baby can move the head freely to attach to your breast, and so on. And in this slide, one of the ways we can tell that baby has a really good latch is that baby's chin is the first point of contact there with the breast. The cheeks are nice and rounded, which tells us that the baby has got the nipple all the way back where it should be. And if we do see any areola, which is the darker skin around your nipple, so some people have smaller areola and you won't see any areola. But if we do see any areola, we need to see a moustache of areola rather than a beard. That way we know that the nipple's in the roof of the mouth in the right spot. So this next slide gives us a closer look at the latch. And you'll notice that the nipple is angled upwards and goes far, far back into the throat. Did you know that your breast could do that? Don't worry, baby's not going to choke. The baby nurses from the areola in the nipple, and the nipple should really reach all the way back to the baby's soft palate. Touch your tongue to the roof of your mouth, and you will feel the hard palate of your mouth. If you bring baby to your breast and the nipple stops at the hard palate of baby's mouth, when she starts to nurse, it will hurt a ton. And the baby will be effectively clamping the nipple between their tongue and their hard palate, which really hurts. Plus, that can really affect the transfer of an adequate amount of milk. So we really want to get the latch correct. And we shouldn't just soldier through the pain and say, oh, it's fine, I'm just getting used to the breastfeeding. No, we need to correct it. Touch your tongue further back against the roof of your mouth until you feel the soft area in the back, and this is the soft palate. And this is where your nipple needs to be for the baby to nurse efficiently. When baby starts to nurse, they encourage the milk ducts to let down or release the milk by massaging the areola and stimulating the release of the milk. And this cannot happen if the areola and nipple are not far enough back in the baby's throat. So how do I know it's a good latch? Well, baby should have a large mouthful of breast tissue. Baby's chin should be indenting that breast. Your baby's cheeks are going to be round and full, not sucked in. And as I said before, if there's areola showing, it should be above the breast and not below. So remember the moustache of areola. Baby's suckling pattern should go from rapid sucks to slower rhythmic sucking followed by swallows. Baby should also be relaxed and content during the feed and come off when they're finished. The nipple, your nipple, should look the same shape when it comes out of baby's mouth as when the feed started. It shouldn't be lipstick shaped or flat. The feed should be pain-free and comfortable for you. If it's not, insert your pinky into the corner of baby's mouth and break that latch and reattach them. So turning to diapers, and diapers are really critical for telling us how much baby's getting. So don't worry about how much milk you can express with your hands or the pump. You know, what tells us that baby's getting enough, and this is a common worry for parents in the first few days, what tells us that baby's getting enough is the diapers and the pattern of diapers that you get. So here are the different colors that you can expect in the first few days. And they transition from black, greeny, dark green, very sticky ones to this browner kind of color, which reflects your transitional milk coming in, and then the mature milk is reflecting these golden, soft, yellow poops. Sometimes green, that's not too much of a worry, except in certain circumstances. And you should be expecting to, after the first few days, once your mature milk has come in, to be having these kind of yellow, soft, sometimes seedy poops. Wet diapers. So after the first few days, your baby, so once your mature milk has come in again, your baby should be having at least 6 heavy wet diapers a day. And again, dirty diapers after the first few days. Once your mature milk has come in, your baby should pass a soft yellow stool at least twice a day, but usually many more times every day. And then the next kind of big change in bowel movements for babies is around about 1 month old and beyond. So around about 4 weeks, it's normal for bowel movement frequency to change, and some babies may only have a dirty diaper a few times a week rather than a few times per day. But if everything else is okay, there's really no need to worry. And you can expect more information about this from your pediatrician. So in this slide, this is a summary of normal newborn behavior. Babies need to wake during the night to feed. It's common and expected for a baby to feed during the night time for the first few months. They need to feed at the breast 8 to 12 times in 24 hours. They'll often cluster feed at some point in the day or evening. Be reassured that they'll eventually flip their sleep patterns and sleep a longer stretch in the night, but they're all individuals, and keeping them awake during the day won't necessarily help. Mums need to rest close to their babies in the same room, and sleep when baby sleeps is what we recommend, and eat as well as possible. Don't go longer than 3 to 4 hours without food, and drink so you're not thirsty. You don't need to drink gallons of water, but just drink to thirst. And so you can see from this slide about normal newborn behavior that in the first 24 hours, baby's practicing. So after the first initial feed or two, they'll probably sleep for a while. And then the rest of that day, they'll be practicing. And they, we shouldn't limit time at the breast. We should just go with the flow. The second 24 hours, they're going to be more alert. Usually we have a very fussy second evening, and the way to get through this and to survive it is to do lots of skin to skin. And again, don't limit time at the breast. Cluster feeding. So cluster feeding can happen most days, often happens in the afternoon or the early evening. But it also happens during growth spurts, and growth spurts are just a kind of, we call it a growth spurt. It's usually a developmental kind of a leap that baby's making, and so they'll cluster feed more for around about 48 hours. And those can happen in the first few days when you get home with baby, around about 6 or 7 days, around about 3 weeks, and it just lasts about 48 hours. It's nothing to worry about, it's just kind of disconcerting for new parents because they wonder why baby wants to feed so often and is crying so much and is so fussy. And really the way to get through it again is lots of skin to skin, lots of holding of baby, and just really going with the flow in terms of meeting baby's requirements for feeding. So, according to the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine, newborns are normally sleepy after an initial approximately 2-hour alert period after birth, and they then have variable sleep-wake cycles with an additional 1 or 2 wakeful periods in the next 10 hours, whether they're fed or not. Like this slide says, you know, if the feeding isn't accomplished as well as we like in those first 24 hours, if baby is reluctant to go to the breast, or for any reason that baby's a bit too sleepy and they're not feeding very efficiently, what we can do is express your colostrum. And the best way to do this in the first 24 or 48 hours is to use your hands. So we can do this manually. It's called manual expression. And then once those 24 to 48 hours are up, we can also use the pump. We can add in the pump, but continue using our hands as well for the most effective expression. But usually, you know, by giving baby that colostrum, it will give them that extra energy, and they usually get back to the breast pretty quickly. And again, in those first 24 to 48 hours, we're not expecting you to make tons of colostrum, just enough for baby to get a sufficient feed. And really that early hand expression is more about stimulating your breasts so that you get a really good supply established. Most babies, like I say, will go to the breast naturally and there won't be any issues. However, in some cases, some babies are sleepier, and this is why we have these kind of special measures. So in this section, we'll look briefly at pumps, pumping, and return to work. You can get your pump through TRICARE. We don't advise a specific kind of pump. I've just listed some examples of electric pumps here on this slide. We advise, however, getting a double electric pump so that you can pump from both sides at the same time. There are some suggestions about how best to pump when you return to work. We usually say to wait to begin pumping until after the first month or until breastfeeding's established, around about 4 to 6 weeks. Expressing too soon and too often can lead to engorgement in some cases. So the recommendation is to pump at least 3 times in an 8-hour work day. However, just adjust that indication according to your baby's needs and your work schedule. Practice pumping while at home to get more comfortable and learn your pump setup, and relax when pumping, as that will help with your letdown. It's important to pump around the same time each day if that's feasible due to your work schedule. How long should I pump for, most people ask me? Well, 15 to 20 minutes at each sitting on both sides should be enough for most people. You should pump until milk isn't coming out anymore. However, if we're trying to boost your supply as well, pump for a little longer after the milk stops flowing. What we're trying to do is send a message to your body that more milk is needed, if it is. So, how much milk does my baby really need? Well, this is baby driven, and only your baby can tell you how much they need. In that first week, when you go back to work, give your minder small bottles. Send along 2-ounce bottles with milk, but in larger numbers. In general, most babies take between 8 and 15 ounces of milk when they're at daycare for about 8 to 9 hours. Your best guideline for pumping is to ensure you pump every time a baby has a bottle. If baby takes 3 bottles at daycare, ensure you're pumping at least 3 times. Ask your provider to keep careful records, especially that first week. Even with a trial day or 2, you may not have a firm idea on what baby's doing in regards to fluid amounts. Keep an open dialogue with the daycare provider about your requirements and feeding amounts. Avoid overfeeding, slow flow nipples with paced bottle feeding. Never encourage a baby to finish a bottle. If the baby pushes the bottle away, you need to respect that. If your baby's in a childcare setting where many babies take formula, watching the bottles get bigger strikes fear in most breastfeeding mums. So just follow your baby's lead. Don't worry, everybody is different. Between the ages of 1 to 6 months, most babies take on average 25 to 35 ounces a day. Between the ages of 1 to 6 months, most babies take on average 25 to 35 ounces a day. Your only real concern about milk supply and production comes when baby starts to sleep a longer stretch at night. And at that point, you need to make sure you're stimulating your breast enough to keep up with baby's demand. Can you convince your baby to reverse cycle and feed lots when at home with you in the evening, etc.? Here's a short video demonstrating the paced feeding method.
We don't recommend feeding babies with a bottle while they are lying on their backs because they are more vulnerable to overfeeding and tend to lose control of the flow of the bottle. This can end up being a forced feeding situation because they have to keep swallowing to keep up with the flow of the bottle to prevent choking. Paced feeding mimics the control babies can have at the breast and prevents forced feeding. Some breastfeeding experts have observed that babies are less likely to refuse the breast when they receive the bottle in a paced fashion. Start by holding the baby upright, supporting the torso with your arm. Place the nipple on the upper or lower lip, wait until he opens his mouth, and let him draw the nipple in. Avoid sticking the nipple in his mouth before he's ready. It helps to let the baby suck a little without getting milk. This is similar to breastfeeding, where a baby sucks for a while before the milk starts to flow. Allow the nipple to partially fill with milk, leaving some air in the nipple. By keeping the baby upright, we slow down the feeding. Gravity isn't pulling the milk out as fast when the bottle is level with the floor. Babies take natural breaks when eating, and when those natural breaks come, tilt the bottle down a bit to really allow the break, preventing milk from flowing into the bottle while the baby is taking that break. When the baby resumes sucking, tilt the bottle back up. That way, parents can relax, get to know their baby, enjoy gazing at the baby, and watch overall behavior. Follow the baby's lead and allow the baby to have control. When the baby has control, the baby will not drink as quickly. It is common to see people wiggle the bottle in an attempt to get the baby to suck more. This should be avoided because we want the baby to set the pace of the feeding. Watch the baby's face for facial expressions or signs that they need a slower flow, such as widening of the eyes, furrowing of the brow, or turning or pulling away. Even a baby that is accustomed to quick feedings will begin to welcome the breaks and will probably start to take breaks on his own. As you can see here, the bottle is horizontal and the baby is taking a break. Paced feeding can reduce pressure on mom when she goes back to work. It slows down how much the baby takes in, so we reduce overeating. It helps avoid the baby eating large feedings when away from mom. If he does eat too much at daycare, he might not nurse as frequently as mom would like when they are together. No need to worry about the baby taking in air. It will come out one end or the other. Burping the baby periodically will help if air intake is a concern. This method of bottle feeding takes some practice. When working with families, explain paced feeding while they offer the bottle. If you show them how to do it, try to make a point of having them practice it in front of you.
Pacifiers can sometimes mean that you might miss feeding cues and can sometimes interfere with the learning of the latch at the breast. So, if you don't feel that you need a pacifier, don't use them until breastfeeding is established at around about 4 to 6 weeks. Some babies don't need pacifiers. Some parents feel that they want to introduce pacifiers earlier than 4 weeks, and that's fine, just be aware of the risks. And if you introduce any bottles, again, use the paced feeding method that we've demonstrated in the video to avoid overfeeding. It helps to enable easy transition between the breast and the bottle. If you can avoid bottle feeding in the first 4 to 6 weeks until breastfeeding is established, then great. Breastfeeding myths. So all of these are breastfeeding myths, and some of them we'll have covered during this talk. Myth number 1, my milk hasn't come in yet. Well, actually your milk is in already. It's been in since 16 weeks because you've been producing colostrum since 16 weeks during your pregnancy. Myth number 2, my colostrum isn't enough for my baby. So as we've seen, colostrum's power-packed with lots of calories, protein, and powerful antibodies for your baby. Your babies are born with a small stomach and are not yet prepared to consume high quantities of milk. So the amount of milk that your breasts produce in those first few days is just right. Breastfeeding is painful. Painful breastfeeding is not normal. It might be common, But this is a myth that painful breastfeeding is normal. It's not. It's not part of the normal physiological process of breastfeeding. It may feel new or slightly uncomfortable, but nothing that's actually described as pain. And painful breastfeeding is a vital sign that we need to do something to improve the latch or something else. So get help if you have painful breastfeeding. Myth number 4, breastfeeding mums get less sleep. Again, research has told us that breastfeeding mums actually get more sleep, in part helped by the sleepiness induced by prolactin, which is the milk-making hormone. Myth number 5, pumping will tell you how much milk you're making. Nope, pumping will just tell you how much milk you can make with the pump. So myth number 6, limit the minutes you breastfeed. So who are we to say when baby with their own appetite and needs will be finished feeding from a breast? We're all individuals and we don't eat the same meals for the same length of time, and babies are no different. We shouldn't remove baby from the breast when they're actively sucking and transferring milk. Allow baby to drink for as long as they want. Myth number 7, you don't need to drink a ton of water to make enough milk. You just need to drink to thirst. And lastly, myth number 8, it's never all or nothing. Any amount of breast milk is important. This was the breastfeeding and pumping class provided to you by the lactation consultant from the OBGYN clinic. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you have any further questions or you want to access more resources, you can find our documents and resources online in the Air Force Connect app.